What's up, you guys? Fulton here, and welcome back for another edition of Taylor Tech Review. We got lots of great news to cover here. We got more AMD news and leaks, we've got Ampere leaks, and much, much more. So let's get started. All right, to get the ball rolling, on July 21st, AMD officially released the Ryzen 4000 series APUs. We've been waiting on these things since they first showed them off at CES in January, so they finally got around to releasing these things. Now, we've got some really good news, and we got some not so great news. These are based off of the Renoir laptop APUs, so they go up to 8 cores and 16 threads. They come in 35 watt and 65 watt versions. Now, given the higher power budget on these versus your standard laptop APUs, they do have higher clock speeds on both the CPU and the GPU, but they are still limited to 8 PCIe 3.0 lanes, just like the Renoir laptop chips. The top APU is the Ryzen 4000G. It's got a 65 watt TDP, a 3.6 gigahertz base frequency, and turbos up to 4.4. It uses all 8 compute units for the graphics, running at a very impressive 2.1 gigahertz. Now, for the bad news. At this time, these chips are only being sold to OEMs like HP, Dell, and Lenovo. And those systems with these chips are supposed to become available around August. Now, AMD's reasoning for this, and this is legit even though it sucks for you and me, but AMD's reasoning for this is because the OEM market is about 4 or 5 times bigger than the do-it-yourself enthusiast market. And this is important because AMD is trying to take market share from Intel and get their foot in the door at the OEMs, because frankly that's where the real money is made. Nobody makes bank-breaking money selling to you and me. It's the OEMs that really make the payday. Now, AMD has said they are planning a consumer-grade release of the APUs soon, but no actual release date has been given yet. If you want to guesstimate, I'm going to say September or October, sometime after the OEMs get their systems out the door and on the shelves. Now, we do know the 4000G series is compatible with the 500 series motherboards. We haven't heard official confirmation yet on the 400 series compatibility, but I rate it as extremely likely, especially if you consider all the drama that we ran into a few months back with the Zen 3 chipset compatibility. Now, from what few leaks have come out, the 4700G is holding its own against a Ryzen 3800X and a 9900K, and I've heard rumors of it overclocking to 4.7 gigahertz on all cores. I'll have to let a little more time go on there so we can see some people get a hold of chips and really benchmark these things and see what they can overclock. But they seem like really good overclockers. With AMD's July 14th release of the Threadripper Pro series, if Intel's HEDT chips weren't dead already, this is pretty much the final nail in the coffin. This new Threadripper Pro family has 4 chips, and it ranges from 12 to 64 cores. And the biggest difference between the Threadripper Pros and the regular Threadripper is that these come with 8-channel memory and have 128 PCIe 4.0 lanes. And this is all in the same 280 watt Threadripper package. These chips are basically EPYC server chips, except that they're limited to a single socket and 2 terabytes of memory versus 4 terabytes for EPYC. Now, just like the 4000G series, these chips are not available on the open market, and they can only be purchased in a system made by OEMs. And right now, Lenovo is the only launch partner I've heard of. I haven't heard of anybody else releasing anything from these just yet. Intel's 2020 nightmare continues with some good info on Zen 3 set to come out at the end of this year. AMD CEO Lisa Su recently put out a YouTube video on the 1-year anniversary of their 7.7 Zen 2 announcement back from 2019. This time announcing the Ryzen XT chips that, to be honest with you, these things turned out to be a whole bunch of nothing. Seriously. All the rumors were wrong, and we only ended up getting 100 megahertz boost on these things, which is basically margin of error on benchmarks. So, be honest with you, save your money, don't buy any of these XT chips, just buy your standard Ryzens. Forget these things were even made. She also said some poor kid got named after Ryzen. Come on, people. Stop torturing your kids. That kid's going to have the worst high school life. Lisa also stated that Zen 3 is looking great in the labs and on track to launch later this year. Now, we've got lots more juicy Zen 3 info, this time coming over from Jim at adoredtv.com. His sources have been dishing out the good stuff and confirmed that Zen 3 will still have 32 megabytes of L2 cache, but since AMD has combined both CCXs into a single CCD, it's now a unified pool of L2, and each CCX effectively has double the cache of a Zen 2 core. It also looks like we may see base clocks somewhere around 4 gigahertz. And now between Jim and Igor's lab sources, it's pretty much confirmed that the B0 stepping is back from TSMC, and this will be the final version going into mass production in September. Jim at Adored TV also got some performance numbers from Milan that it's, quote, over 20% faster in single-threaded integer workloads compared to Rome, 20% faster in 32-core integer workloads, and between 10 and 15% faster in all-core, that is 64-core workloads. He also debunked the old rumors that it might have 50% higher floating point performance than Zen 2, and instead stated that the floating point gain is probably less than 10%. Unifying the CCXs does remove the latency penalty when you're using more than 4 cores. That is an advantage that Intel had in gaming. So it's very likely that as soon as Zen 3 comes out end of this year, Intel will be losing their gaming crown. We've got tons of Ampere leaks coming out left and right, and by this point, it's pretty much confirmed that the initial lineup of Ampere chips will be on Samsung's 8 nanometer. The latest leaks are saying that the 3080 Ti/3090, whatever NVIDIA decides to name it, that can all change at the last second, will be based on the GA102 die at 627 millimeters squared. NVIDIA has also taped out the GA104 chip for the 3070 series, the GA106 chip for the 3060 series, and the GA107 for the 3050 series. We've also gotten word that Ampere cards will probably be using a new 12-pin power connector that can carry up to 600 watts of power. I'm just hoping that we don't ever actually see a card using that much power, because I don't want to see what kind of cooler you need for that video card. Now, just to give you guys a comparison, your standard PCIe slot that you plug your card into can carry 75 watts by itself. So if the video card or whatever you plug into it uses less than 75 watts of power, you don't need any extra power connectors. A 6-pin power connector can carry an extra 75 watts. The 8-pin connector can carry 150 watts, and this NVIDIA connector can carry 600 watts, so huge bump there. Now, current rumors are that the high-end Ampere cards may use up to 350 watts. So this would let you replace 2 8-pin connectors with a single 12-pin, making your cable management a little bit easier. In Intel land, videocards.com has managed to get a hold of an interesting photo showing how Intel may be differentiating their upcoming Rocket Lake CPU, currently rumored to come out sometime in the first half of 2021. The i9 would have 8 cores and 16 threads, the i7 would have 8 cores and 12 threads, and the i5 would have 6 cores and 12 threads. Now, Intel's also been dropping hints that they're going to be unveiling their new 10 nanometer Tiger Lake laptop chips with Z graphics on September 2nd. And these Tiger Lake chips are looking very competitive with AMD's Renoir chips, so there should be some really good laptop choices this fall, no matter which side you pick from. Competition at its best, people. Gotta love it. Each company constantly one-upping each other. Love it. We've also got Thunderbolt 4 being released. Now this thing supports up to 2 4K displays or 1 8K display, if anybody can even find one of those things. Supports data at 32 gigabits per second, and best of all, it uses a Type-C connector and is fully compatible with USB 4, 3, 2, and 1. Intel's Tiger Lake chips are going to be the first chip to have Thunderbolt 4 built into the silicon. In fab news, TSMC, who's been riding high on their 7 nanometer and 5 nanometer nodes, is now bigger than Intel and Samsung by market cap. A large part of TSMC's growth is thanks to Apple and their iPhone sales, which actually leads us right into our next story, that TSMC has 80 million 5 nanometer A14 Bionic CPUs ready for Apple's next-gen iPhones and probably their laptops, since they're moving into their own business there. If you wondered why AMD doesn't have any 5 nanometer chips coming out this fall or first part of next year, it's probably because Apple bought TSMC's entire supply. Moving on, the JEDEC standard for DDR5 has also been approved now. So now if you're just looking at this chart, this may make your eyes cross. So let me break down the 3 most important parts of this, which is the max data rate, the max UDIM size, and the max die density. The max data rate is the easiest to understand. Speeds and bandwidth go up every new generation, but if you look at DDR4 on the chart and compare it with DDR5, you might be wondering why DDR4 shows it maxing out at 3200 when you can go on Newegg right now and buy DDR4 4800. The speeds on the chart are just for the highest approved JEDEC speeds, but the speeds go higher unofficially beyond the JEDEC number. So even though DDR5 is showing 6400 as the highest spec approved, SK Hynix was already talking about DDR5 8400 back in April, and I've heard rumors that we may end up with DDR5 10000 at some point. So clearly, this chart is not showing you as high as the speeds will end up going. Now, the other 2 parts, the max UDIM size and the max die density, they kind of go hand in hand. With DDR5, the max die density quadruples, meaning that each individual RAM module that goes onto the RAM chip can be up to quadruple the size of the ones that were on DDR4. So what this means for you and me is that we're going to end up with much higher RAM capacities when DDR5 rolls out, up to 128 gigabytes per slot. This means that 32 gigabytes is going to be the new 16. Forget about 16, it's dead. As soon as DDR5 comes out, don't even look at it. You'll probably even have trouble finding 8 gig DDR5 sticks. For the most part, they're going to start with 16 gig sticks. So 32 gigs is the new entry level, 64 is mid-range, and then 128 gig is the high end. And if you want 256 gigs of RAM, hey, you can do that with 2 sticks. This should help with games coming over from the next-gen consoles with all of their super fast SSDs. PCs will just compensate by having twice as much RAM. Hey, our SSD isn't as fast? No problem. We got twice as much RAM. We'll just load it all in RAM and then we're good. And since we're talking about upgrades, if you're running Windows 8, it's time to upgrade if you want to play Cyberpunk 2077 this fall, because it will be DirectX 12 only. Seriously guys, just go buy a Windows 10 key from URCD Keys for like 15 or 20 bucks, and you're done. And then you can play Cyberpunk. And since we're talking about 15 or 20 bucks, that may be how much more money it's going to cost you for games on the next-gen consoles, because publishers are looking at $70 price points for these. Now, if you want to know why, inflation. Inflation. Everything constantly goes up in prices, and AAA title prices have been pretty stable for about 15 years, while the cost of games just keep going up, 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 up. So it sucks, but it's inevitable, guys. We're just going to have to deal with it. But you know what you can't get for $20? A stake in Epic Games, and that's because Sony just bought a $250 million minority stake in Epic to, quote, broaden their collaboration across Sony's leading portfolio of entertainment assets and technology, and Epic's entertainment platform and digital ecosystem. So, it's probably safe to say that this means Unreal 5 engine is going to be very, very well optimized for the PS5. And maybe we'll see some PlayStation games coming to the Epic Store someday. Hey, why not? And our last mention in the console space is that Microsoft has now discontinued production of the Xbox One X and the Xbox 1S All Digital Edition. This makes the likelihood of the rumored cheaper and less powerful next-gen Xbox console codenamed Lockhart even more likely. The rumor is that Lockhart is a cut-down, less expensive Xbox Series X that's aimed at 1080p or maybe 1440p gaming instead of 4K. The higher the resolution goes, the more RAM you need, the higher the performance you need out of your GPU. So by cutting down the resolution, they can cut RAM, use a less expensive GPU on the thing, and sell it at a cheaper price. We'll just have to wait till fall to get more info on this from Microsoft. They're being pretty quiet on that one now. Now, in the satellite internet space race, OneWeb, which has filed for bankruptcy in March, just got bailed out by the UK government for $500 million. OneWeb is going to be going up against Elon Musk's Starlink internet service, which already has almost 600 satellites in orbit, I think, versus OneWeb's 74. And Starlink is already sending out beta tests and invites. Now, even with the UK government backing OneWeb, honestly, my money's still on Starlink to come out ahead, but just like in the PC space, more competition is always welcome and should help keep prices down and service quality up. Sadly, the James Webb Telescope couldn't keep prices down, and it looks like it's going to end up costing about $10 billion, and NASA is now targeting in October 31st, 2021 launch date. And that's going to wrap things up for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you liked this video, I'd appreciate it if you would smash those like and subscribe buttons, because it really does help with the YouTube algorithm. Until next time, I'll leave you guys with some gorgeous 4K shots from Mars. Link in the description for the whole video. Take care.